You are Locked On Braves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Braves POSTCAST, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Grant McAuley, Jake Mastroianni with you to wrap up a weekend which could be, in a word, disappointing for the Braves. Might be the best way to describe it, but there are a lot of other adjectives that I'm sure have been used by both the Braves and Braves fans over the recent hours in the wake of what was potentially, we'll talk about it, maybe the worst loss of the year to this point. Maybe it's all subjective. I don't know. I don't know which Braves multiverse we're in, but either way, the ending of Sunday's game, one of the bitterest pills that Atlanta has had to swallow, if in fact bitterest is a word. We probably won't delve any further into that, but we will delve into what happened over the weekend in Colorado and, of course, get you set for a pivotal 4-game series against the suddenly surging San Francisco Giants. That's the next stop for the Braves. As always, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta here on YouTube, and Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the code Locked On MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Jake, we knew how big this 10-game road trip was going to be in terms of the opportunity that it gives the Braves to revert and get back to their, what they would hope, their winning ways that they were on for a moment in time before falling into another losing streak. I mean, this roller coaster ride just continues for this club, and it was a roller coaster ride in Denver, Colorado, certainly over the weekend. A bitter pill to swallow on Sunday, as I mentioned. Saturday, though, you might have been feeling the completely opposite way because of what the Braves showed, particularly at the plate. I guess you can take some positives out of the offense, but it is hard to overlook how disappointing the loss was on Sunday in the manner in which it happened.
Yeah, certainly. I think the most demoralizing loss is the word that I've been using. Just the fact that you got an 8-2 lead in the 8th inning, that has to be a win. And it flipped everything because you're going to have a series win, has some good momentum going into the next series. And now it's just another crushing defeat. And you're trying to pick yourself up off the mat once again.
Yeah, most certainly. It does represent a few things. Demoralizing loss is one of them. A missed opportunity as well, I think, to your larger point there, because as the Braves, rolled into the month of August, they did so finally seemingly getting their footing underneath them, and then they really fell down hard on this recent homestand, and that carried over to the opener against the Colorado Rockies, and then you saw some things start to happen, I feel like, on Saturday that made you start to believe perhaps that this offense was capable of bigger and better things. And look, I understand it's Coors Field. I don't know what level the Humidor will actually play in keeping a good offense down. I know the Rockies aren't necessarily the best offense in baseball, but they do play better at home. Whatever the reasons were, you just felt like the Braves had finally figured a little something out after what had been a very frustrating week of baseball, only to see this win really just be snatched right out of their hands or slip through their fingers. I don't know which one of those you prefer.
Yeah, all of them, I guess, work, but it's just the weekend in general. Like Friday night, you came back in that game, you tied it up. And again, you thought, okay, here's this moment. You're going to come back, and then you give it right back to the Rockies and you lose by 1 run. On Saturday, you had that moment where you did come back and you completed the win. But even in that one, you took the lead, you gave it up, and you had to go back and get it. But at the end, they won and they come through. And you felt like you could ride that momentum into Sunday. You had a big lead, and you had a chance there to close out the series. And I thought Sunday was their best played game of the weekend until just 1/2 inning.
Yep.
And like I said, everything just changes right there.
In a span of 6 pitches, the Braves went from winning by a comfortable margin to trailing by 1 run. And the timing of it, the 8th inning, when you're on the road, all you've got is those final 3 outs between you and a loss. And even a club like the Rockies, which, again, they're not one of the best in baseball, but you give it up late, your chances of pulling off a comeback aren't exactly going to be written in stone, that's for sure. And we've seen that with the Braves this year because something they've been so good at in recent years and certainly over the course of their run of success under Brian Snitker has been their ability to come back. But, Jake, those have been a little bit harder to find over the course of this year. But this was a day where you didn't feel like you had to do that, I think, to your larger point, because they had done what they needed to do. They grabbed an early lead. They added on to that lead. They got further insurance runs. They kept adding on to it, and it still wasn't enough.
Yeah, I mean, Sunday's exactly what you want to see. As you just pointed out, it's an offense that takes a lead. You get good starting pitching. I know we'll get into Schwellenbach. I thought he was great again. and you add on to that and you make it comfortable so that you shouldn't have to use your best guys in this one. And then it turned out by the time those guys came in, it was a little too late.
Yep.
And just things got away from them there. And it's frustrating. And look, the pitching staff's been great all year. We've talked about it. The offense did their job in this one. You certainly cannot put it on them. And you, again, as you also said earlier, who knows, the Coors Field effect in that, how much do you really put on the pitching staff? But you had an 8-2 lead, Grant. I mean, that has to be a win. I don't care where you're playing. You got to find a way to get 6 more outs there. And the pitching staff just had a terrible weekend. Like I said, outside of Schwellenbach and Iglesias and Pierce Johnson, everybody else in this pitching staff really seemed to struggle there in Coors Field.
Yeah, no, they did. And it's a larger problem for the Braves because it predates the Coors Field. I mean, think about how bad that Milwaukee series was for the pitching staff. Worst we'd seen them all year. I mean, they rolled into the series with the best ERA in baseball. By the time they were done, they were still in the top 3, but they had added nearly a quarter of a run to their earned run average for the season. And when you've played 110, 115 games, you have to be pretty bad to add a quarter run to your staff ERA over the course of 72 hours. But that's what the Brewers series was. Putting that aside, I do feel like this Braves pitching staff, I mean, it is going through a lot right now. I don't know if a wake-up call is what is needed here. I feel like Spencer Schwellenbach kind of provided one of those for him, stepping in very much where they needed him to, because we're talking about a week, Jake, where the Braves didn't have a pitcher completing 5 innings until Grant Holmes, of all people, did it on Friday. Max Fried was able to back it up again on Saturday, but that was not the finest hour for Max Fried either. And again, it's not a fun pitching environment, but even putting that aside, finding a way to start getting this rotation back to where it's not asking the bullpen to cover 4 or 5 plus innings worth of work would also go a long way. And Spencer Schwellenbach, to make a long story short, his 6 innings, that quality start that he just turned in at Coors Field, he continues to impress, and he just continues to do exactly what this club needs him to do every time he takes the ball.
Yeah, and it's really, great to see. And even in that environment, he came through and was able to, first time pitching in that environment, was able to kind of figure it out, and said he wasn't really able to throw his sinker much. Mm-hmm. And this one, I think he said he only threw it 1 time in this game just because he was trying to, didn't feel like he had the movement on it pitching at Coors Field, but he was able to still navigate it and get through that 4th inning jam, bases loaded, no outs, to get out of that and still have the lead. I mean, we talk about it all the time, his mound presence and just how, mature he looks out there to just stay calm in those situations and just make some pitches when he needs to. So he did great work. For Max Fried, he's still trying to struggle to find it. It reminds me of those first 2 starts of the season where stuff looked good. He had good movement on his pitches, just could not control them whatsoever. All that said, defense let him down in that one too. He probably should have been through at least 5 innings with only giving up 2 or 3 runs in that one. And that just, that speaks to Max Fried and just the pitcher he is, that he still didn't have his good stuff, but should have been able to get you through 5 innings with a chance to win the game, which he did. They ultimately won it, but should have been even better than it was. But Schwellenbach just, continues to impress. The Braves just, got to be careful with him. Obviously, you want to think about the long-term future of this kid who doesn't have a lot of mileage on his arm. But I mean, he's thrown the last 2 6-inning games for this Braves team. They've come more than a week apart because the Braves are trying to manage his innings.
Yeah, and he has completely and totally been able to, I think, take a spot in this rotation and make it his own. And I know we went into the weekend wondering when the next Spencer Schwellenbach start was going to be. We got our answer that it was, in fact, going to be on Sunday. I don't know if the Braves had gotten to the point where it was they were going to try to give him a rest, stay away from him, give him an extra day, save him for the Giants series. I'm not 100% sure on where all that was. I don't know how you were reading those tea leaves, but it seemed like at some point over the course of this weekend, and we can get into this more later when we have more time, that it became pretty apparent, given the week that preceded this road trip, you're going to have to go with your best guns, the best available, not look at the strategy points that they've had, which, again, I understand that there's some value to it, but you're in the nitty gritty now. Like you got to have your best arms out there. You've got to win the day, move on to the next day and win that one as well if you want to get where you want to go.
Yeah, Brian Snicker, listener of the Locked On POSTCAST here, because that's what we said last time. You can't afford to do this anymore. I mean, it is, as Snicker said after the game, it's go time. You have to have it now, and you got to throw your best guys out there every 5th day. There is no more trying to save your guys for the end of the season. We're at the end of the season, and you are in a dogfight. You have to win every time out and give yourself the best chance to win every time out. So that means every 5th day for Chris Sale, every 5th day for Ronaldo Lopez, Max Fried, You got to have these guys out there every fifth day to give yourself a chance to win. Spencer Schwellenbach's one. Again, the guy has a bright future. I don't want to blow him out, but he's been the Braves' best pitcher right now. He and Chris Sale.
Yeah, and that's not a combo that you would have thought in the start of the season. So we'll get into that a little bit more on the other side of the break. We'll also talk about some offensive boosts that we've seen. One in the form of a hitter that you kind of wanted to see have a great weekend in Coors Field. He plays first base for this club. The other, the newcomer, the re-debut of Jorge Soler had not really given us the kind of highlights that we were accustomed to the first go-around. Well, he had himself a nice big weekend at Coors Field. We'll talk a lot about those two and, of course, get you set up for the Giants series. All of that's coming your way on the Locked On Postcast. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets, and they got great last-minute deals. Save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets all together with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but just create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off when you download that Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. It's Game Time. Let's keep an eye on what happened on Sunday, or keep our eye on it as far as this series was concerned. The Braves dropping 2 out of 3 to the Colorado Rockies after that bitter eighth inning. 9-8 was the final score. Braves dropped back down to 61-56. Rockies just 44-75. Not a banner year for the Colorado Nine, but they had a banner eighth inning to take 2 out of 3 in this series. 8 runs, 13 hits, no errors for the Braves. They left 6 men on base. 9 runs, 16 hits, no errors, and 8 men left on base for the Rockies, who again exploded for 7 of their 9 runs in the 8th inning, coming at the expense of Luke Jackson to start and Joe Jimenez to follow. As far as that's concerned, Jimenez drops to 1-4 on the year and blowing his second save of the season. The win goes to Rogers in relief, and Vodnik picks up his 8th save for the Rockies. Usually I'll start talking about the starter here in this segment, but I want to talk about the 8th inning a little bit more, because I look at it this way. You got a 6-run lead, so you don't want to be using your high leverage guys. I think you already kind of touched on that a moment ago. But for Luke Jackson, I felt like he gave up the homer, and then things just kind of went sideways on him. He was trying to make pitches to go after hitters, and the Rockies in this one, keep in mind, they scored these 7 runs, and you might think, okay, well, there's got to be some walks, some stolen bases, some wild pitches, maybe an error, something's gone wrong. No, they just kept swinging early in counts and hitting, and in a span of, I believe it was 6 pitches, they really turned this entire game on its ear. Jackson gave up the first 4. Joe Jimenez got thrown straight into the fire with this one. He went right out there throwing strikes and was greeted by very aggressive Rockies hitters who were able to cash in 4 hits and 3 earned runs against him. I'm of the belief of a couple of things. Number one, that Joe Jimenez never should have had to pitch in this game. Yep. And number 2, that if you can't use Luke Jackson in a 6-run game, I don't know what scenario in which you would use him. So I don't know that I'm necessarily armchair managing this game as much as it's just disappointing that it completely unraveled in the fashion that it did. But I can also understand why you didn't have your high leverage guy warmed up and ready to go. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. You kind of, taking the words out of my mouth. I've already recorded my podcast for Monday, and I basically said what you said. If you can't trust Luke Jackson in an 8-2 game, when can you trust Luke Jackson? But Joe Jimenez, I'm making excuses for him, but as you kind of alluded to, he should have never had to come in this game. And I'm sure he's sitting back there thinking, I'm going to get the day off in this one. And then all of a sudden it's become a ball game, and you got to get hot and go out there. And look, some of those pitches weren't terrible. One of those pitches was a fastball that was 4 or 5 inches off the plate. And it's just the Rockies went up there aggressive. They put the barrel on the baseball, and they found some grass in that very expansive outfield. And look, I'm not saying Joe Jimenez has to make better pitches. He's got to be able to get an out there. I mean, you just needed 1 out, as Snicker said, just 1 out, get out of that inning before things just completely fell apart. I would say the one mistake was the one to Rogers, a slider that was down, but it was over the middle of the plate that gave the Rockies the lead there. But some of those other pitches that he was giving up hits on, I mean, they weren't terrible pitches. They were just good swings by the Rockies, but it should have never gotten to that point. It's kind of, I think, what we're both saying here. It never should have had to come to that. And it's just frustrating that it did, and that ultimately you come away with a loss because of one bad inning. Like I said, the whole entire rest of that game, I thought the Braves played their best game of the weekend. Good defensively, good starting pitching, good offense. And it's just one bad inning takes all that away. And I'll go to the ninth inning too, to touch on this. You get a leadoff single, you pinch run Luke Williams, and I understand you don't want to run into an out there, but the Braves got to have somebody in that spot that you can get out there to trust to get you a stolen base, to get in scoring position with nobody out there. Maybe this is just because I've seen so many double plays from this Braves team lately. It just feels like there's a runner on first, it's going to be a double play. But if you're not going to use that last bench spot, at least get somebody that can go out there and get you a stolen base. They're as easy as they've ever been to get. And I feel like that's something that's missing on this Braves team.
Yeah, I mean, it'd certainly be helpful. And I would imagine when you get honestly Albies back, Whit Merrifield would fill that role, and it would make sense. But you don't have that right now. And we don't need to talk about the second week in September at this point, because that's not going to do us any good whatsoever. But yeah, it was just the way that inning unraveled on the Braves in the eighth was, and I posted something on social about, this was a classic Coors Field bullpen meltdown. I felt like it was. I mean, the home run that got it all started, and then it was just hit after hit after hit after hit. And yes, you're right. In hindsight, make some more pitches, make better pitches would certainly be helpful. But they also weren't out there just putting on a bunch of runners and walking guys, hitting somebody in the back foot with a slider. The kind of stuff that usually precedes a tough inning, a bad inning for this club is usually those self-inflicted wounds. This was just a club going up there, swinging the bat and making it happen. That's what the Rockies did in that inning. And, I've got to figure out a way to get through it. And unfortunately, the Braves weren't able to do it in that particular frame. We talked about Spencer Schwellenbach, but a great line on him. Six innings, 6 hits, 2 runs, 2 walks, and 7 strikeouts. Obviously, I have this written in the margins here. This kid is legit. He continues to prove that every time he goes out there. One of the runs that got knocked in against him, I believe, was that Jacob Stallings dying duck that went over the top, over behind first base and into shallow right field. He didn't even know where he hit the ball. I think he thought he'd fouled it into the dugout, but he didn't even hit it and start running. He had no idea. It just happened to be that kind of a day for the Rockies. That's another one that you could throw in there where a little thing that went right, and later on, I mean, all the runs count the same. That's just one of the little frustrations that's in there, but you can't fault Spencer Schwellenbach for how well he was pitching in this one, how he was able to take command of what could have been an absolute mess for him with the bases loaded, nobody out, and limit that damage, protect the lead, and the Braves offense went about the business of adding to it. Spencer Schwellenbach, he's still good. Your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I co-sign that. But yeah, a great start from him. And that fourth inning that we already talked about, just his ability to work around that and limit the damage, I think just speaks to who this kid is. 82.2 mile per hour average exit velocity against, able to just, avoid hard contact, only allowed 3 hard hit balls. Luke Jackson did that in 2/3 of an inning. So, I mean, just really good stuff from Spencer Schwellenbach. You never know what you're going to get going into Coors Field, especially if you've never been there before. Everybody talks about how your pitches move differently, and he throws a lot of pitches. He threw 6 pitches, and that's what I mentioned. He only threw the seeker once, but that did make it 6 pitches for him in this one, and he was still able to figure it out and use his stuff to get some outs. 2 walks for him, which is just breaking news. He walked 2 batters, but again, I think he can maybe get some of that to not pitching so long, having that extra rest that he had and just pitching in Coors Field, maybe attributing to some of that, but it's 2 walks. So it's nothing crazy here. It's just the kid, continues to impress every time out. I want more of them. I just don't know how much more of them we're going to get.
Yeah, we'll see. And I do think they're going to continue to work him in there. And I know they would like to give, this added rest and all that stuff, as we talked about a little while ago. And really, I think we pretty much got to all of it. Brian Snitker saying after the game that to the point, the extra rest for the rotation, just not feasible anymore, at least not at this moment. Maybe they'll figure it out with off days, he said. But this whole trying to reverse engineer their rotation so that there's 6 or 7 guys in it at any given time, that's just not something you can do when your back is kind of against the wall at this point. The wild card, the Braves got pushed out of it. Now they're back in a tie for the 3rd spot with the Mets, but they have a couple of teams behind them that could make their presence known, the San Francisco Giants being one of them, and having lost 7 out of 8 at a time of the year where I know he also said, we feel like we've still got time, but the more you look at it and the more you start to kind of see the percentage of the season that's left versus the percentage that you've already played, that time is beginning to tick down right here. I do want to talk quickly about a couple of offensive highlights we saw in this one, and particularly players we saw over the weekend swinging it great. Not just to Marcell Ozuna or Austin Riley. No, we get to talk about Matt Olson, who had a big game on Saturday, and Jorge Soler, who had a huge series, 3 homers, 9 runs batted in. The Olson grand slam, one of the big highlights of Saturday's game. You just kind of have to hope, Jake, that these are signs that these two could step up and step forward, because if you get the top of that lineup going, it could be a very, very dangerous group, and that could help start to give the pitching staff what we've talked about all season long is more than just that razor-thin margin for error.
Yeah, the top of the order is really starting to look good with Soler, what he was doing over the weekend. Obviously, Riley and Ozuna. Olson with a good. I thought Olson had really good at bats on Sunday too. He had a hit, had a walk, and even in the 9th inning, I know he hit into that double play, but fell behind 0-2 and then was able to work it full. Just unfortunately hit it right to the shortstop there and got on top of the baseball. But I just thought the at bats looked much better from him on the weekend. D'Arnaud with a home run. Sean Murphy continues to get on base and take his walks and get some hits. So that catcher spot. So 1 through 5, and even Orlando, he had a 4 for 4 day on Sunday. So, I mean, now you're starting to look at this lineup 5, 6 deep, and things are really starting to look up. And, Michael Harris could be back soon. If he hits the way he's hitting at Gwinnett right now, which I know we'll talk about in a second, I mean, could be a really big boost to this lineup. So things are starting to look up there. It's just, Now the team's not pitching. It's just kind of this season. You finally get one thing going and the other thing kind of takes a step back. But again, it is Coors Field. You have to keep that in mind. But I was very impressed just with the type of at-bats that Matt Olson in particular and some others were having over the weekend.
Yeah, good to see, and hopefully they can keep that going. They'll need all the offense they can get as they match up with the San Francisco Giants. We'll talk about that next. We'll give you an update on Michael Harris, a rehab assignment, a lot of good things going on down there. And, of course, we'll get the pitching matchup set up for this particular series, a pivotal series. We can certainly call it that, as the Giants are going to be throwing some of their best arms. Braves going to be throwing some of their best arms. We'll talk about all of it as the Braves postcast continues. Get supplies from the site that is made for the skilled trade. SupplyHouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to get you or to help you to get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. If you need help with an order, you can get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business, and you get to talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get the competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere at any time with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. Let's get into this series that is coming up here. It's a 4-gamer against the San Francisco Giants, a club that's only a game and a half out of that final wildcard spot, which is currently being shared by the Braves and the Mets, as both the San Diego Padres and Arizona Diamondbacks have surged to the top of the wildcard race. They're also, I think, maybe making things a little bit more interesting out in the NL West than the Dodgers had in mind, but we'll see what the final 6 or 7 weeks looks like. But as far as the Braves' ticket into the postseason, the wild card is certainly one route up for it. And I don't know that we're going to be talking about the National League East race anytime soon anyway, unless or until the Braves are able to turn these things around. It's going to be Chris Sale, Charlie Morton, Max Fried, and Grant Holmes listed as the starters for this series. Jake on the other side, Giants with Blake Snell, Kyle Harrison, Robbie Ray, and Logan Webb. So the pitching matchups going to be pretty intriguing for these two clubs. I know Grant Holmes is probably the name that stands out as one of these may not belong here, but in terms of what the Braves are doing to line up for this first 3, they are getting 3 of their most experienced pitchers on the mound with a chance to hopefully put themselves in position to win a very important series against the Giants club that has been surging since the trade deadline.
Yeah, they're 7-3 in their last 10 games. They've been playing really well, and a lot of that because of that pitching staff. Which you look at their ERA on the year, they're bottom 10, but over the last month, they're top 10. They're 7th in ERA over the last 30 days or so. And Blake Snell looking like Cy Young once again for him, no hitter here recently. So, I mean, it's going to be a tough one. We talked a lot about the offense and how good it's looked. And, you come out of Coors Field, now you go into, I don't know what they're calling it these days, but playing in San Francisco, and it's a, more of a pitcher-friendly ballpark, and you're facing some really good pitchers. So it's going to be a tough task for this offense, but it's also an opportunity for the Braves pitching, I think, to get on track and to hopefully give them some length. We have not gotten much length out of the Braves starting staff here lately, and that would certainly help with some of the bullpen woes that this team has been seeing as well. So again, you got to pick yourself back up. You're right there. You're in a position still with a postseason spot, but as we keep saying, you got to get things going here pretty quickly because those dates on the calendar, they're running out here.
Yeah, they are. And as far as the Braves pitching plans, as we talked about with Brian Snitker saying, they're at that point where these extra rest days, not really something they can afford to do right now. He did say Reynaldo Lopez expected back when he's available to come off the injured list. Of course, he was delayed a little bit. He will make a rehab start. You put him in a rotation with Chris Sale, Max Fried, Charlie Morton, and of course, Spencer Schwellenbach. That's a pretty potent, pretty capable top five. I mean, there have been some ups and downs from some of these arms, certainly, and it happens over the course of 162. But if you could get it lined up where you've got those five guys going on a regular rotation, Jake, that's a pretty good looking group.
Yeah, and that's the ideal scenario too, right? We've seen it when, for instance, earlier in the year when Spencer Strider got hurt, it wrecks your rotation, and it feels like it takes a while to kind of get things settled down and get back to where you have those five guys kind of feeding off each other and giving you some links. So to get Lopez back in there, get your top five guys that you really want. And like Snicker said, now's the time. You need to run those guys out there every fifth day. They look for opportunities to push some guys back, maybe skip Schwellenbach here and there. Although I don't want that to happen. Maybe Ian Anderson gets an opportunity. He's been pretty well. Ed Gwinnett here lately. But either way, getting Lopez back, settling down this rotation, and just getting more in a routine that these are your five guys. They're going to be pitching every fifth day. Hopefully that can help this Braves pitching staff get back on track like it was earlier in the season. Because, again, the offense has looked better at times, other than those back-to-back shutouts that they had. The offense has looked better since the All-Star break. So now we can just get the pitching on board. Maybe we do see this team go on a little bit of a run.
It has been a weird back and forth for this team. When you think that things can't get much worse, sometimes they do. And then all of a sudden, when you think that, hey, maybe they're bottoming out, they pull the nose up and go on a winning streak, or at least turn things around to try to cancel out, what had been going on prior to that. And then swings back the other way. This has been a very strange season, unlike any that I think I've ever seen. I don't know, Jake. I mean, I'll date myself here. I grew up watching the Braves in the 1980s. Like, I know what this team looks like when it's not great. Obviously, we all sat through the rebuild not too terribly long ago, and there have been a few other uncompetitive seasons, I guess, in the last 20, 25 years here and there, but they're more the exception and not the rule. I guess I say all that to say is this is the worst above 500 team I think I've gotten feedback on over the course of my time covering baseball. I know it's been infuriating, frustrating, and downright confusing at times to try to figure this club out. But, you just keep looking at it and thinking they still have the talent if they can get healthy and get Michael Harris back from his rehab assignment in Gwinnett at some point during this series against the Giants. I believe he's eligible on a Wednesday to come off the injured list. He's batting .435 with Gwinnett. 2 more hits on Sunday. Could be back in the lineup soon. That could certainly help. But this has been a bit of an enigma type squad or type year for this Braves club.
It certainly had. It's one that's hard to really figure out. I still have people ask me, why are the Braves so bad? I wish I knew. I wish the Braves knew. I wish the Braves knew why they've been so bad, other than just a ton of injuries. I think it's frustrating, obviously, just because the expectations were so high. Everybody talking World Series or bust coming in to the year. And then even with all the injuries, I just still feel like there is enough talent there to be playing better baseball than they had, but it just feels like a lot of regression, everything going against them, and it's just all adding up to what's been, I would agree, is one of the more frustrating seasons. Although 2021, I know everybody's tired of the comparisons. I remember that one being pretty frustrating for a long time before things turned around. But I'm right there with you. I still believe in this team. I think the talent is there. Get some help, get these guys back healthy, and I still think this team can go on a run. And all we've seen, all you got to do is get in, and then hopefully all that bad karma this team's had in the regular season turns around.
That's the story every time. If you get hot at the right time, you just find your way in. Who knows what could happen? We've seen it happen too many times in recent years and over the course of baseball history as well. Just when you think you got it all figured out, the game, it's not played on paper. So some crazy things could happen. We'll see if crazy things happen for the Braves. They would like some winning to happen, though, as they roll into San Francisco. First of a 4-game series. Chris Sale, 13-3 at 2.75 ERA. Blake Snell is 2-3 with a 4.31, but he has allowed just 5 runs in 39 innings since coming off the injured list, including that no-hitter that Jake mentioned, 49 punch-outs in those 39 innings as well, a sub-2 ERA, quite obviously. Going to be a marquee matchup there, and it will be, I think, a very pitching-heavy series between these two clubs as they throw a lot of their best arms at one another here. The Giants 1.5 games behind the Braves in the wild card standings. Could make a push, could make some things pretty interesting. They may not have really any say in what happens in the NL West thanks to some other teams in that division, but the Giants do look very capable in this series. It's a 9:45 p.m. Eastern time first pitch, so make sure you've got the coffee on tomorrow afternoon because you're going to need it. I know I will. That's game 1 of this 4-game series. Jake, obviously Chris Sale has given the Braves a lot this year. A great performance to start out this series would be just what the doctor ordered to help the Braves get on track and get back in the win column.
Yeah, we always say it when you have these tough losses. It's great to have Chris Sale going the next day to give you a chance. Going to be 2 really good lefties on the mound. Great pitching matchup. Again, hopefully that offense that the Braves saw at Coors Field continues over.
Yep, they will take all the offense they can get. Braves unfortunately dropped 2 out of 3 to the Rockies after a very disappointing end in the finale on Sunday. They'll look to dust themselves off, get back in the win column against the Giants in the first of a 4-game series on Monday night. That brings us to the end of this edition of the Braves Postcast. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta here on YouTube. Give us those likes and comments. We appreciate those. Share the show with a friend and subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. Once again, the Braves will try to get their winning ways going as this pivotal 10-game road trip rolls on with a 4-game set against the San Francisco Giants. For Jake Mastroianni, I'm Grant McAuley. We will catch you next time. And until then, so long, everyone.